So, Star Trek 3 The Search for Spock. As I said on the last movie video that I had done, Star Trek 2 kind of started the trilogy of the Star Trek series. And the middle ground for that would be Star Trek 2 The Search for Spock. Of course, it says in the title, what they're doing, what they're looking for, so you would expect that they're going to get there. I would argue for all those who say that why watch it, because it's the answer's in the title. I would argue that it's not necessarily the destination, but it's the journey that gets us there that's worth taking. On the way of getting Spock, several key things happen in the Star Trek universe. Several things that were established from Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. The introduction of David Marcus, Kirk's son. He's taken out in this episode. Savick is moved up. Not only is she, a cadet, but she's now graduated. She's now a full officer and on the Grissom. So that's progression for that character. She's no longer the quote unquote trainee. And then the destruction of the Enterprise. Of course, it's different model from what was in the 1960s, but for all intents and purposes, it's supposed to be the same ship. And it's the destruction of what many fans have said is probably the most beautiful starship that's been out there. It could be argued either way. I think beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but it's not in that journey of getting Spock. All these different things happen. We reintroduced the Klingons that were last seen from Star Trek Motion Picture, and these Klingons are a little bit more. I would say barbarian. If that's I'm not sure how really to describe them. I don't feel like they're fully the honorable Klingons that we know in TNG, but they're not quite where they were in the motion picture. So there's still a continuing evolution of the Klingons. Initially, it was supposed to be Romulans that was in this episode, but they decided to switch it up and put Klingons instead. I kind of wonder what it would have been like had they actually went the Romulan route, because I think that's kind of interesting. That being said, I did love the fact that they brought back Savick, or not Savick, Sarek, a character from the original series that had come on, and Spock's father. And this was actually an important reason to bring him. It wasn't just pandering to the audience. It was an important reason to have him there. So I thought that was something where that was really surprised when the door opens and it's him. The one thing I did enjoy about this episode was you got to see more of the civilian life of Starfleet rather than like what was in Wrath of Khan, where it was very military. It was very they were reestablishing what Starfleet was, and this was also doing the same thing except in a different sense. Whereas before you saw the work life, now you get to see a little bit more of the home life. And it still feels a little off, especially with Kirk's birthday. Feeling the age, and that was something that was kind of left over from the last movie. So it's one of those things where you're feeling the progression, you're feeling seeing them in Kirk's apartment, meeting, and kind of toasting for Spock and the loss of friends and everything. It was one of those things where, it was a good film for a much different reason than Star Trek II was, but it worked on so many different levels. The production design for this, it was also, again, well thought out. You had different, besides the civilian clothes, you had different types of Starfleet uniforms. Like Kirk's kind of, I don't know what you would call it, but it's kind of like a civilian type, like a bomber jacket type deal, but it's not quite the bomber jacket. And that's a key look that he would have in Star Trek 4 as well. To me, that was always kind of the defining Kirk look, because that was the very first time that I actually saw Captain Kirk, or Admiral Kirk. But this film, it does, it shows with the Genesis planet, when you kind of cheat a system and you take the shortcuts, you kind of fail. and you won't get the results that you want. And I think that's an important lesson that I think we can learn from nowadays with global warming coming and and all these different hell, we just had a vaccine for COVID. So it's like it's one of those things where it's like if you take shortcuts and you don't do the proper research and you cheat, you're gonna lose. Again, symbolic by David's death. Um, I I really enjoyed the fact that we got to see the Genesis planet be something that was unstable and something that didn't work, whereas the last movie was something that was kind of hopeful, and now that hope's taken away. Whereas before it was bittersweet, and we gained the Genesis planet, this hopeful thing, but we lost Spock, and now we've lost that hope of the planet, and what it could represent, but we're gaining Spock back, so it's hope, but it's in a different way, and I like that how it shifts, those positions, and it's very subtle, Krug, I think, is a very strong villain for this film. Christopher Lloyd did a really good job, I felt, especially considering the fact that they were still redefining what the Klingons were. I felt he did a really good job there. So, there's that. Um, John Larroquette from Night Court, if you're familiar with the 80s, or he played one of the characters, one of the lawyers in Boston Legal, in like I think fourth season, something like that. But he played one of the Klingons in this too. Probably the Klingon that had the most to say, and the only Klingon that lived, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Um, so that was, it was a pleasure to see, John Larroquette, because I was a fan of Night Court, and to know he was in there, I was like, that's cool. The fact they had, a Klingon on Night Court, and then Brent Spiner, of course, was a reoccurring character on Night Court. It's kind of like, oh man, all these reoccurring, people for Star Trek. It's almost like a revolving door. But anyway, so my thoughts on the movie was, it's a great middle movie for that trilogy of Star Trek. I think it's one of those where, some people say the odd number Star Trek movies are bad, but I don't think that's true with this one. I don't. Um, I think at worst you could easily say that this is the best of the quote unquote worst Star Trek movies. I just don't think that's I don't think that's the case. I think it could. I think a case could be made to say everyone except this one is not that good, or could be taken as a guilty pleasure. But this one I think is really good. Especially given like Scotty fucks up the Excelsior, and everyone kind of gives the middle finger to Starfleet. It's like, fuck it, we're gonna go do it. We're gonna go do it. We're gonna get our boy back. Tell me that's not heroic. That's some damn good stuff. But I think this is a good movie. Um, you know, there were times when I was a kid where this one would shift between favorites. All three of them, 2, 3, and 4, would always shift, like which one was a favorite, because it was so good. Um, but anyway, those are just my thoughts. With that in mind, uh, be genuine, be safe, and keep on geeking on, guys.